and welcome to Chats, a television podcast, Season 4, The ChatzRoom. My name is Allen, and I'm joined by the Jay Leno of podcasting himself. It's Magellan.
Hey, you notice how many cards I have, huh?
You have a lot of cards.
A lot of cars.
Cards.
We're a couple of cards.
We're full of cards here at the ChatzRoom in the studio that we call home. It's a new world, Magellan. It's a new show. If you haven't joined us before, we are Chats. We are the television podcast known worldwide for witty commentary, hilarious banter.
Technically speaking, we are known worldwide.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's extremely true, yeah. And we talk about a different show every couple of months. This time, we're talking about the Newsroom. It was an HBO drama show run by Aaron Sorkin in the late 2000s, in the early 2010s, one might even say. And it's a weird show. It's about a newsroom. It's about the people who make the news, and they made it in like 2012, about 2010, and that's interesting to us, and we're going to talk about it 2 episodes at a time for several weeks, and we want you to join us. So with this, our first episode, we are going to be discussing the first 2 episodes. First up, we watched Season 1, Episode 1, We Just Decided To, which was written by Aaron Sorkin and directed by Greg Mottola. It aired June 4th, 2012, and it takes place on April 20th, 2010. We also watched Season 1, Episode 2, Newsnight 2.0, which we're going to be discussing after the break. But first, in this episode, in the pilot of the Newsroom, after an incident with some vertigo medicine, ACN Newsnight anchor Will McAvoy becomes a controversial public figure for shouting at a college girl about how America is in fact not the greatest country in the world. After his brief sabbatical, he comes back to an empty newsroom where his EP Dawn has moved to late night news and his entire staff has left. The only people remaining are Maggie, a young new assistant who's dating Dawn, the barely a character yet Neil, and Will's boss, Charlie. Charlie decided to inject some life into the show by replacing Dawn with Mackenzie McHale, Will's ex-girlfriend who's covered wars, along with her assistant Jim. After lots of painfully awkward character introduction scenes, life is interrupted by a, quote, yellow news item about an oil leak off the coast of Louisiana that quickly escalates to orange and then red as the news team scrambles to use this crisis as their strong comeback to the world of balanced and inspiring journalism. The show goes great as Matt coaches Will through it via microphone, and everyone goes home confident that they did good news this time. They did good news. Magellan, what did you think of the Newsroom pilot? It's an hour long.
Oh, man. I am so... Alan, listen. We've been friends for a long time. We really enjoy each other's conversation and company. And this podcast was started as a way for us to indulge in enjoying each other's conversation and company. I gotta say, I think this might be the most fun show to discuss so far.
Oh, yay!
We'll see. I don't know, because it's just, I'm just glad that we're tackling Sorkin. You know, we are...
To the ground and arresting him.
Because he's one of these voices in American television where he is at once both entirely predictable and entirely inscrutable. He is both entirely lovable and entirely hateable. There are things about him that you watch his characters interact and you think, oh my God, this is what people should be like. And then you watch them interact and you think people are nothing like this. And
These are not humans.
They shouldn't be this way. So it's just putting your feelings about an Aaron Sorkin show into a single concrete sentence is very difficult. That said, I think I watched this with my girlfriend, and I think she summed it up really well in sort of one thought here. Quote, all the news stuff is so good and fascinating, and all the relationship stuff is so shitty.
Ah, the nail has been struck.
So I think that's really the distillation of how you should be feeling about this show. I read a really interesting, the nice thing about covering a show this came out in 2012, right?
Yes.
So at this point, 6 years ago? What? Wait, what? Happy New Year.
Yes. Oh, man. Crusty old man.
So the show was coming out 6 years ago. The nice thing about covering such a recent show is that and maybe not the nice thing for us, I don't know. Well, it remains to be seen. But there's a lot of think pieces out there on the Newsroom. There are a lot of reviews, written reviews. And so I was reading, I believe, the AV Club reviews of the first 2 episodes, and they were talking about how similar the Newsroom is to previous Aaron Sorkin shows, specifically to Sports Night, which I haven't seen, but seems cool. Is it good? Have you seen it?
I've watched the pilot of Sports Night, and I liked it, actually.
Okay.
It seemed okay.
But the point that was being made, and I don't want to steal too many points from other people, so I think we'll get into our own analysis in a moment here. But the point that they made was that a lot of the sort of love triangle stuff, or the like women being written in this way where they're a little spacey, or I don't know, whatever it is that Aaron Sorkin's doing. On Sports Night, a show about fake sports casting, it was kind of charming because the stakes weren't that high. But on a show where the subject matter of the plot is serious national crises, taking these detours to have these weird relationship moments makes everything feel completely incongruous and pointless.
The problem is especially the fact that by putting the relationship stuff hand in hand with the news, you're both devaluing like how important their reporting is by being like, there's an oil leak on the coast of Louisiana. Meanwhile, Dawn doesn't want to meet my parents. Like, it puts all of the drama of the plot on the same playing field, and it makes everything feel inconsequential.
Right, and there's no sort of resonance there. There's no theme that ties together oil spill and meeting your girlfriend's parents. Whereas maybe in Sports Night, which again I haven't seen, maybe it's easier to create a parallel between the way that they're reporting the sports and the relationship stuff. Or maybe that's easier to do in a show like Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, for example, which I've seen more of. And is also...
And which I've heard is worse than this show, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk. I would love to talk about Studio 60 in more depth a little bit later on, because there are a lot of things that he's recycling from that. The sort of like we were lovers before thing that Will McAvoy and Mackenzie McHale have is definitely being recycled from Studio 60, and I'm sure was in the West Wing at some point or something like that. But Studio 60 had a similar sort of, in that situation, it's funny because it's sort of the opposite problem, where the sketch comedy show he's trying to make it seem too important, you know? And there's this like dramatic relationship stuff going on in the background. And so in that case, it feels like the relationship stuff is a little heavier or a little more overwrought than the fact that we have to make a sketch about like Bush or something. So that there was an interesting balancing act problem there as well. Anyway, so that's my long-winded answer to what I thought. I have a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of things to say
I'm
here.
so glad.
Yeah.
I want us to begin by tackling the most famous scene probably of this whole show. It's still shared on Facebook, bad Facebook news feeds that your parents and aunts and uncles will bring occasionally. It's the first scene of the show. It's the scene where you have Will McAvoy, you have a cartoon conservative man and a cartoon liberal woman.
And I've seen this clip.
Arguing.
I definitely saw this clip when the Newsroom aired. Just to set the stage, you've seen this whole show before, right?
Yes, I watched the majority of it as it was airing, yes.
Yeah, I have not. I definitely saw this clip back in 2012, and then I watched the pilot to decide if this was the right show for us. And so this was my second time watching the whole pilot, I think, unless I had somehow seen the pilot back in 2012, but I don't remember if I did or not. Anyway, Yeah. So this scene, go ahead. This scene is shared and reshared, and we've all seen it probably at least once.
With good reason. It's kind of the moral and the theme of the show, kind of brought to the front lines in just a couple minutes. Because you have Will, who's just this like cartoon centrist, and you have the moderator who is clearly trying to like press him on his centrism and being like, why are you a newscaster who doesn't affiliate with either party, and you don't even affiliate as an independent? Like, clearly you have some sort of opinion because you're a human being and you care about politics. You have some sort of alignment, but why are you so hesitant about sharing it? And he's dodgy about it, and he's Sorkin character-y about it, being like, I voted for the guy who won or something.
Yeah,
he has like all these different
New York
lines.
Jets fan.
Yeah, I'm a New York Jets fan. I do like. Okay, so this is like the key thing with the newsroom for me is there's a part of my brain that likes it when the moderator says, no, not Jeff, no, Mr. McAvoy, like, I'm going to press you on this. You're going to answer this question. And you're like, oh, they don't say that in real debates. Like, that's not, the moderator doesn't get to like bark back at the debaters.
Yeah.
And also the debaters don't get to like scream over each other without listening to each other for minutes at a time. That's not how things work. All of this stuff happens, and there's just something about it that feels like electrifying in a way that so much of Sorkin's work does. They're like, oh, like, I know this isn't real, but there's something like almost taboo about getting to see people do it. And that is so much of this show. It's like, I know I shouldn't like this. I know this is dumb. This is so dumb, but I love watching it.
He's rendering this parallel universe to ours, in which the rules of discourse and decorum are just different enough that we can kind of explore questions that we have about what if our newscasters had to be honest and take an honest stand. He's not entirely giving us a realistic answer to that, but you're right, there is this sort of temptation, and I think electrifying is a great word, that it sort of looks enough like the real world, but it's different enough in just the right ways that it hooks us. You're sitting there and you're enthralled. You're like, you're really engaged in hearing what Jeff Daniels' character has to say, even though you've only known him for a couple minutes. So I think that's something that we should mark up to Sorkin's credit, that he right away establishes the stakes of who this guy is, what this guy values, what he's holding back, why he's holding it back. And then when he says, all right, you know what, here's my answer, you feel that moment. You understand that this is a big shift for him in his whole career. And it sets up the show. It sets up the stakes and the themes of the show really well. There's some stupidness to it.
Well, I mean, it's like, hey, his girlfriend is in the audience and she's holding up a sign that says it's not, but it could be.
Oh
like,
God.
And then the question of like, is that real? Because he looks back and then she's not really there, and like, is this something that's in his head? Unfortunately, this is a question that they answer.
Right.
It is the reality of that scenario. I liked thinking, oh, maybe he just like, it was a fan, or maybe it was just like some old person he used to know that doesn't come back to the show. But he sees who we realize later is Mackenzie in the audience.
Yeah.
And when he's asked the final question, which is, what makes America the greatest country in the world? He like comes up with a bunch of dumb answers, and the guy's like, no, I want you to answer it. And the conservative guy said, what is the conservative guy says, like,
the liberal woman says diversity and opportunity, and the conservative guy says freedom and freedom. And let's keep it that way.
It's so corny. And then he's like, he dodges it, and then she holds up the sign that says it isn't. And then he gets worried, and then it goes, but it could be. And he goes on this long, again, really famous speech where he talks about how, as soon as he says, like, we used to have more ambition. Like, we used to do things.
Yeah. Well, it's, he starts with, well, we have to get past this idea that it's the best, because it's not. We are, whatever in healthcare, we're whatever in education. The only things that we're the best at are number of percentage of incarcerated citizens, defense spending, and I don't remember the third one.
Yeah.
Oh, and people who, I guess, religious, people who are religious.
Yeah, you're right.
And that's a cool moment. It's cynical, right? But we kind of get the sense that we're learning about this guy a little bit. And then, yeah, he has this pivot of, it's not the greatest country. But God damn it, it sure used to be. We were led by great men, and we had great ambitions, and we weren't all millennials, because millennials are the worst generation ever, period.
It's like, I wanted to barf, dude. I fucking wanted to die.
Oh my God. I was on board. I was ready for this show to take me somewhere. And let me tell you, every time I start a new episode, I'm ready for it to take me somewhere. And then it has a moment like that where I'm like,
no.
Are you the right guy to be conducting this train? Because you have this weird animosity towards young 20-something women for some reason that
like active hate towards them. It's remarkable. And it's, this scene is like everything that's wrong with Aaron Sorkin. It's the fact that the phrase America isn't the greatest country in the world, but it could be, is the most centrist sentence in the world, because the subject is liberal and the predicate is conservative or whatever, or the vice versa. But also the way that the person he tells this to, the person who asks the question, is like you said, a college sophomore named Jenny, who is a blonde girl and is like conventionally attractive, and she says, why is America the greatest country in the world? And then he's like,
she asks that, and she says in one sentence or less, and then the whole room laughs at her,
and they fucking laugh.
And it's like, why did we need to do that? He calls her sorority girl in his response. It's just too much.
And he makes her cry, and you're not meant to feel that bad about it. You're like, wait, well, she kind of got owned is the problem.
Yeah.
Like, he goes on this whole thing, and he feels conflicted about it, and then they get this like very hard Aaron Sorkin cut to people running walking really fast outside, and the two other pundits are like, what the fuck was that? What are you doing? And he's like, I'm taking medicine for vertigo, and I think it works because I've got it.
And you're like, I'm back on board.
Aaron Sorkin, you've resold me. Here's all my money. And then he's like, just every other moment. This is like the whole show, dude. Is you're gonna be like, no, this sucks. Wait, no, it sucks. No, it sucks. And then you will end it on one of those two. I hope. And I mean, whatever. We get this scene. Everything we just saw is, I think, a couple months ago. We cut to the present. He has been on a little bit of a sabbatical. He comes back to the newsroom, and everybody's gone. And he's like trying to have a big conversation. And meanwhile, Dawn's having a pizza party. And we get introduced to New York City and how we are in this like big cartoon news office, the ACN building, which becomes the primary setting of the show. And we get like really awkward character introductions of the people that are still left on the staff. Like I mentioned earlier, we have Don, who is mostly identifiable by his weird white boy afro, like tiny mini afro, and then the fact that
he never buttons his shirt all the way. Yeah,
he does not know how to button his shirt the right way. He misses 2 buttons, and he sucks. And he's at a pizza party, but it's a meeting. No, it's a pizza party. Come on, there's pizza.
I really
have you ever been to a meeting
Don.
that's really a pizza party?
Oh yeah, I've been to my share
in my life. We meet him. He's bad. I hate Don. Don's my least favorite.
I love Don. What are you talking about? I'm invested in Don.
He's like exemplary talking down to people character. Is that why you like him though?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
The reason I like Don is because he's a character that you're not supposed to like.
Well, yeah.
You know what I mean? So Aaron Sorkin is actually writing a person who talks down to people who you're not supposed to like.
As opposed to Will McAvoy, who talks down to people, but you're supposed to like him.
You're supposed to root for him to become redeemed or something.
Yeah, exactly. You're right.
Yeah.
He looks out in his window at the end of the second episode, and he sees the Statue of Liberty, and you're like, man.
Oh my
fuck.
God. I was okay. I was like, all right, he's on board. Whatever. You're gonna play a little song. That's fine. And then it shows the shot of the Statue of Liberty, and I just wanted to rip my
voided your
hair out
bowels.
of my head.
Oh,
It was so much. I like Don because I know that he's gonna be shitty. I know what Don's gonna do. I don't know. I'm into it. He doesn't button all his buttons. It's so fun.
he gets the pizza party. He yells at people. He calls them stupid.
Yeah.
He doesn't understand who Mackenzie McHale is later. Yeah, Don's a toilet boy.
Yeah.
And that's consistent. That's consistent character work, for better or for worse. There's a lot of like weird. I picked up on it because I remember these characters, but like introductions of people who we won't see until later, like Reese, the sort of like financial head of ACN, is on a conference call with Charlie at some point. Reese is introduced in the second episode. He's the short guy that tells Will to like step up to Mackenzie's level, basically.
Yeah.
Reese becomes important later. We meet Elliot for 2 seconds, who's like the guy who runs late night, I think. And he like has conflict with Will. Elliot sucks. No, don't worry about Elliot.
Yeah.
But then we get to Margaret. Maggie. Let's talk about Maggie. I can't believe I feel this bad for a fictional character.
Yeah.
Her existence pains me because she serves an important purpose of like the way that you can kind of fall into higher up positions and have to like work twice as hard for people to accept who you are. Like she's clearly written as like Aaron Sorkin understands that like women are treated worse in the workplace, but he doesn't. Like she's still a joke. Is the problem.
Right.
Her first introduction is like her stumbling over a chair and being like, oh, I guess I'm your assistant now. And
Right.
That's
her boss
Maggie's
doesn't.
character.
She's loyal to a man who doesn't know her name.
Right. He calls. Not only does he get her name wrong, he like corrects somebody on it and gives them the wrong name.
Yeah.
Like she likes this guy and she's one of the people who stayed, and it's like, why did you stayed because you had to? Like you didn't stay because you like the guy. Like it just. And we'll talk about it in the second episode, but like the way that she had like the obsession with like who is she dating and like her relationship status and how her parents think of her and all this stuff, it's like very annoying to watch, I think is the word I'm looking for. She's like, come on.
Well, she's written as sort of, I don't know, as kind of klutzy in a way that only really happens to people in fiction, you know?
Right.
Like there isn't really anybody. I don't know anybody like her in my life, but I know plenty of fictional characters like her.
Right.
It's this like stock way that men write women that doesn't really work.
And the funny thing is that we're introduced to her and she falls over something in her first scene, and then we get Mackenzie hyped up, who's this really. I think this is something we're gonna come back to, is like the parallel between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
Because Maggie is like constantly struggling to be good, and Mackenzie has to like people know that she's good, but she has to reinforce that still.
Yeah.
She has to still be like, no guys, like no really, I know how to use email, I promise. Like, come on.
Yeah, well they give up on her being competent very quickly.
Yeah, in like one episode. Like the first scene that she's introduced is like she's covered wars. She took a bullet to the back. She's done more reporting than I've ever done in my whole life.
She she leads us through this impromptu newscast with we're flying by the seat of our pants and we do the best damn show ever.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And then the second episode, she doesn't understand how to not reply all or something.
Doesn't know how to use BCC or whatever.
Oh man.
I think, is it the second episode where she says to Maggie, I'm going to take you shopping?
I think that was the first one.
Yeah, at the end of the newscast, they're both really happy. Or like Maggie gets her the name of the BP guy or the phone number. Mm-hmm. She's like, I'm going to take you shopping. Like, Aaron Sorkin, stop! You need to be stopped and put somewhere. Put him in a corner. Don't let him write women. Get him like one woman on his writing team. Like one.
The crazy thing, I was looking into this, and I think Maggie is based on a real person who consulted on the show.
Whoa.
I'm pretty sure I saw that in the IMDb trivia. You want me to pull that up?
Yeah, if you can find that or get the name or something. Because Because Maggie just doesn't. She feels like the least real person. Like you said, she's a TV klutzy stereotype. But maybe the person, I don't know, maybe the person who she's based on like wanted that portrayal to be what it was.
All right, ready?
Yeah.
The character Margaret Maggie Jordan was based on the real-life Margaret Judson, an MSNBC insider who started out as an NBC page and worked her way up through the ranks in a real-life network newsroom. Judson was handpicked and eventually cast by Aaron Sorkin for the role of Tess Weston. Judson also worked with the writing team as a special consultant.
Whoa. Tess is like one of the cooler side characters on the show, actually. Tess is the like blonde one who does really good work. She's like kind of quiet. I didn't know that's cool. I did not know that at all. I guess that makes more sense. I feel like we don't learn about Tess later though. She's like a non-character. She's just someone to hand people papers. But I had no idea about any of that. That's super interesting. I'm always curious, like, where does Sorkin get the ideas for his shows? Like, what? Like, yes, he wanted to do a news show because it's an easy way to distance yourself from having to engage with politics, but still get to say something. That's why he did a news show. But where? Because he also like clearly does his research. The news that they do is like accurate. They don't lie on this show.
Right.
The part where it feels disingenuous, and we're gonna talk about this when we get to like the actual conflict of the episode. I feel like we've been on this one forever because it's a fucking long episode. Is they get the cheat code of it being 2 years after the fact.
Yeah.
And again, things that we're going to keep talking about. There's no way anybody could have known the information that these characters know.
Right.
And that they can intuit.
Well, it makes you really, and there's plenty that's been written about this, I'm sure, but it makes you really wonder what the point of this show is. Because if it's Aaron Sorkin's way of saying this is the way the news should be done, it's difficult for him to say that when the way that they get this info is that Jim's sister works at Halliburton or whatever, and his roommate works at BP. And it's like, yeah, that's how you do the news right. And then you just...
Is you have good sources.
You get all your good info and you just tell it to people. Duh.
And you got to do it faster than the other guy, and ratings do not matter at all. Never worry about ratings.
And it's unclear how is this not something that the other news would do? You know, this is what would show up on the news. It's just that they got there first because they decided to follow it, thinking that it could become something.
I want to pivot to talking about the actual news.
Yeah,
because this episode uses its hour-long runtime kind of well. It is slow, but once it shifts, the whole rest of the episode is about this event, the BP oil spill off the coast of Louisiana.
Yeah.
So we're introduced to Jim, who is exactly the male counterpart to Maggie. He falls in the same way. He's awkward in the same way. He looks up to someone he doesn't understand. They are just literally two halves of the same coin.
I think that actor's great. I really don't like Jim as a character. He's just boring to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
And his whole character is just Maggie was like, hey, or not Maggie, sorry. Mackenzie was like, hey, that girl over there is a young me. You think I'm hot, right? You like me? Just be in love with her. And he says, no, what?
No.
And then he
literally
does
like
it?
when they look at each other, she goes, Cupid's arrow, and it's like, no, yeah, but yeah, it's the thing is yes. It's not a funny joke. It's what happened. Oh, it's Sorkin. I want to make a soundboard of just me going, Sorkin.
Yeah.
Because that'll be useful for the whole show. Yeah, Jim's fine. The thing is, like, Jim in the second episode annoyed me. Jim in this episode is just like the vessel for the news to happen.
Yeah, he's the guy who comes in but he's also there to kind of knock Don down a peg, which is fun.
Yeah. Before we get to the thing, Charlie, real briefly. I love Charlie.
I love Charlie.
Charlie's the best character on the show.
Yes.
I think. In my opinion. Yes. Charlie's the best character on the show. Because Charlie is so detached, he almost doesn't feel like a Sorkin character. He's just fucking drunk on his ass all the time.
Yeah.
He's so wasted. He runs a company. He doesn't care. He fought in Vietnam. He tells this story to Will about how a dancer in Da Nang was beautiful, and he wished that she would be with him, and then she just suddenly fell into his lap. And then he goes, and that's a story about sometimes how things can fall into your lap. You're like, well, Charlie, why did you say that? Like, I just wish someone would. Well, I don't wish this, but like someone would just be like, Charlie, what do you do here? What's your like? Do you just literally, in a literal like text sense, his job is to tell Will what to do, and when Will is like, I don't know what's going on, he goes, hey, Will, here's the right thing to do.
Yeah,
he's essentially the show's get out of jail free card for. We are all too young and unprofessional and inexperienced to know how to handle something. Let's consult Charlie.
Right. He's there to kind of stand at the back of the room, too, while characters are fighting. And just kind of nod and cross his arms.
And then threaten. He said, I'm a Marine. I will beat your ass, Don, or whatever. In that like little boardroom scene. And then in the others, the best Charlie scene so far, when the girl is like sitting next to him. He's like, do you have Twitter? She's like, yeah. He's like, tweet this. Best show, full of integrity, great stuff. Gotta love it. Perfect show. We're really improving the news. She's like, I only have 140 characters. And he's like, make it work. Which is dated. I like it when the show is dated. It's always dated, by the way.
By design.
Literally. The moment where the yellow news blip comes up, it comes up with the date April 20th, 2010, like a typewriter at the bottom. Because the show and Aaron Sorkin are obsessed with how things used to be. Down to the theme song being just like this like sensual, erotic fetishization of like God. Walter Cronkite's face with like the most bullshit inspirational orchestra music. Da-na-na-na-na, da-na-na-na, the news. I love the theme song. It's so stupid.
It drives me nuts. It's crazy.
Yeah, the music of it changes a tiny bit throughout the show, but I think the visuals are mostly the same. It's like, here's the Challenger, here's Cronkite, here's the Geraldo, like just your classic men doing the news.
I mean, this really is, this show is animated by a sort of "Make America Great Again" sentiment. If you think about it.
It could be, and it used to be, and all that stuff that Will says at the beginning totally feels like the same rhetoric of, we can get back to a better country that we used to be.
Yeah, remember when white men did good stuff in the 50s? It's like, oh, yeah, totally. Let's do more of that.
But marijuana? No thanks. I like music from the olden days when Italian mobsters talked about, what was it? What's the line?
Italian mafia sang about white people sex. It's a great Vine, classic Vine.
Classic Vine.
Really good
classic
Vine.
Chat's bit is for us to just blindly quote a Vine.
Yeah.
It's unforgettable. Yeah, so the news happens. There's an oil spill.
Yeah.
It's probably not a big deal. Don says, shut the fuck up, Jim. It's like so mean to Jim. I think my favorite parts of the episode were every time Don got really close to Jim and was like, you're making me uncomfortable right now. I love that. Those two boys. They're the boys.
Yeah.
They're the boys of the show. He sees the news blip. He's like, that seems bad. And then Neil, who again does not get named until the very end of this episode,
right after he's been called Punjab by Will, and that's not a big deal. The great thing about the way the news used to be run is that we could be racist to our staff members, and it wasn't a problem.
I think you made a good point. Speaking of, like, this is like a thing that's going to come up is the wealth of the crew of the show and of the cast of the show and the diversity of the crew of the show are bad. Like, everyone's rich. Everyone's way richer than they give off. They are. Everyone has like gigantic cartoon New York apartments and infinite job security, and they can afford to go to bars every night. And also, there are approximately 3 people of color on this show.
Right.
And if there are more, then they're in the background.
They're all the ones with the least lines, also.
Yep. So you have Neil, who gets called Punjab, and he's like, oh, science, blah, blah, blah. I made a volcano in high school, or in primary school.
Because he's also British, yeah.
Because, yep, exactly. This leak could be pretty bad, and everyone's like, it's probably fine. And then Jim finally starts getting some sources. They're like, guys, I think it's bad. And I legitimately like this whole like montage of the escalation I think it's exciting. It's just like, oh shit,
Oh,
this
yeah.
didn't seem like a big deal, and now it's the biggest deal. They make it feel like realistically, I remember where I was when I heard about the BP oil leak. That didn't seem important to me. Like, I knew it was bad because like people were hurt and the environment was ruined, and it cost companies trillions of dollars.
Yep.
And it led to like fundamental re-examination of how we inspect things and how we like manage oversight on that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't feel important. When you're in a newsroom, everything like that feels like the biggest thing in your whole life.
Yeah. Well, we were younger too when that happened.
That's true.
We were in like 10th grade.
I think something though that this show doesn't do often is like remind you that like how important these things are to the rest of the world outside of the cast.
Yeah.
Because there aren't too many people that aren't in this group that come up on the show. It's a weird choice because it leads to like everything feeling important, but like because it's in real life, you remember like, oh, that thing wasn't that big of a deal as I remember. I mean, it's great that you guys reported on it.
Not to jump too much into the next episode, but there's a line thrown out in the next episode where they're trying to gather guests for their immigration episode. And someone is like, let's put a human face on immigration. And everybody basically says, nah, we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to have a whole episode of this TV show where white people sit behind their desks and talk about immigration in the general sense, and never really engage with it in a practical, real-world way. So I think that's right, that these issues are being examined in this vacuum where it's hard to actually feel the impact of the things that they're talking about on the world outside.
It's and the thing that's exciting about once Will gets to the point where he's at the desk and Mackenzie is coaching him through it is not like this is a big deal. It's like, wow, we got it first. Like the excitement is from like the fact that we quote unquote won and we beat the other news networks and we said a good thing about this.
Right.
It just feels pithy. It just feels like why is this is a big deal in such a small Zoom, and I think this is intentional for what it's worth. But like, it's such a big deal. Like, we nailed it. Oh my god, we said the right thing about the BP oil spill. Good work, guys. High fives all around. We're all getting drinks after this. But it's like it's still just like people, and things they talk about later. Nobody actually watches the news.
Yeah.
It's 2010 and nobody sits down and watches the news. But to them, it's important. And that's the thing I like about the show.
Yeah.
I know it sounds like I was poo-pooing it, but like ultimately, yeah.
That
sequence,
that sequence is awesome. It's one of the coolest TV sequences I've seen, I think. It's kinetic. It expertly weaves the characters and how they feel about each other into the rhythm of their conversations and what they're doing. Their characters have arcs. They make decisions. They succeed. They fail. They step back. They step forward. All this stuff. All the pieces are moving in this beautiful way. And, you had to slog through like 35 minutes of nonsense in order to set everything up. But it almost feels worth it in this final sequence. And if the whole show was like this, that'd be a great show.
And yet,
yeah,
and you get to watch Mackenzie coach him through it, and then there's that really fun moment where they're like, guys, we don't even have a script written for him, and then she says like, Will does best when he doesn't have a script, like he's gonna nail it, and really he's just saying facts, like he's not
nothing on nothing on the prompters where this man eats as if he's like Shakespeare or something.
Like he's saying the smartest things in the world. All it says on the prompter is vamp. And you get all these people being like, oh my god, he's doing it. He's crushing it. This is amazing. And we even get a brief little shout out to, and I really wish the show did this more, but like the characters who do stuff on the news that don't get many shout outs, like the guy who writes the graphics.
Yeah.
I believe Tess hands the graphics guy some papers and says like, these 3 are accurate, this one's unconfirmed, but make all of them, produce all of them. And he has to like write chirons and then swap them out as necessary. And Mackenzie threatens, she like takes over his desk and threatens to make it say vertigo medicine with Will McAvoy or something. And like that stuff is so cool to me. I like watching the little ins and outs and the bits and pieces of how the news happens. The way that people like flip the switches to turn on the audio, and they kind of say like, all right, 3, 2, we're back in 5, and they do the countdowns. All of that stuff is so exciting, even though it's a scripted show, and like no one's gonna fuck up. Like,
Right.
it makes you feel like there's these big stakes to it, even though it's just the news.
It's really cool.
Yeah. And so they do the news. They do
it good.
They grill the PR guy from BP, or from the company that you said earlier, Halliburton, and then they talk to the intern, and turns out that he wasn't trained very well and that they don't inspect enough. All this stuff happens. Good job, you nailed it. We succeeded, yay! And then Charlie says something about like, how did we decide to do the news? Or what? How did we make the decision? We just decided to. And you're like, ooh, that's the name of the episode. This show is very good about like towards the end of each episode saying the name of it.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I love that stuff. I'm corny. And then Mackenzie says, Maggie, I'm gonna take you shopping. That's bad. And does anything else happen at the end of this episode? Oh, I think at this point we realized that it was Mackenzie at the beginning.
Yeah, Mackenzie and Will have their conversation. Because over the course of this episode, we've learned that they have a romantic history, that Will really doesn't want her there, but also knows that she's the best. He negotiates a contract such that he could fire her at the end of every week if he so chooses. And then they have this conversation where she basically says, you know, when you met my parents, you were perfect. You might not remember it. And he says, I really liked the way this line was delivered. It was something like, your dad ordered a beer and I ordered a Diet Coke. So he like said Diet Coke in a certain way that I liked. Anyway.
A Diet Coke.
A Diet Coke. And he just rattles off all these details about that day. And you realize, oh, you know, both of them really reflect positively on the relationship that they've had. It leaves you the mystery of what happened between them, which is, I was bought into it. I'm interested in knowing more. I care about the Mackenzie-Will relationship, at least for now. Yeah.
I don't care about Jim and Maggie.
No.
No.
And then they part ways, and he tells her that he thought he saw her in the audience that day at whatever college they were at. I don't remember what it was. Mm-hmm. And she almost says, no, it was me. But then he gets on the elevator, and then she flips through her thing, and she still has the papers. It was her.
Oh my God, it was her all along. What does that mean to you? The fact that, so it just kind of like, all it does is it reframes the introduction to be like, oh, Mackenzie actually like planned to for this whole thing to happen to Will.
I don't think she planned it. No, I think she just happened to be there and pushed him in a certain direction. I don't like it. You know?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense. Why was he seeing that other person then? Because he thought it wasn't her? He was trying to convince himself?
I guess that's a mystery for the rest of season 1, isn't it, Magellan?
Is that going to get resolved?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's fucking dumb.
Okay.
Oh boy. Yeah, there's like little things that you don't even realize they're going to keep bringing back this season. Like that one, or just like throughout the whole show. You're like, why is this? Why do we care? Who was there?
Yeah.
In the college. The point is that he said the words. He definitely, that's real. That's true. Who said it? Who showed him the paper in the background? That's irrelevant. But yes, it was most likely it was Mackenzie.
Yeah.
We did it. Great job. And that is, we just decided to, before we go to break, if you've listened to Chat to Television podcast before, you know that we usually read trivia about the episode that we just discussed before we go to break. There isn't a lot of trivia for the Newsroom because it's a modern TV show and they made it and they got funding and it happened. Like there's very little like production trouble except like with writing wise later on. The casting isn't that interesting. They're all white people. It's the like inspiration. Like, you can't even, like, you know how with, like, certain sci-fi shows you could be like, oh, this plot was technically inspired by this real life thing. This plot was inspired by a real. It was a real thing that happened.
Right.
It is what the trivia would always say. So in lieu of that, because it's a show about the news and a show about events that are current in the moment that they took place, we're just gonna like talk about some stuff that happened in the news, around the time that the episode takes place.
Okay.
Because this show is really good about presenting dates to you, and I like that about it a lot. And so we can actually pinpoint that this one takes place on April 20th, 2010. Which, yes, if you type April 20th, 2010 into Google, the first thing that comes up is the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. That was without a doubt the biggest thing that happened that day, in that year. But some other stuff happened. I have this Wikipedia page open. I'm going to send you a Magellan if you want to look at it as well.
Great.
We can use this a lot. It basically has like world events that happened every day of every year. Shout outs to whoever made this on Wikipedia. It's very good. Just to kind of pick and choose a couple, there was a volcano eruption in Iceland, which I remember hearing about.
Yep.
I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of this volcano.
Oh my goodness.
There's a lot of umlauts and FALJKOUs in there.
Yep.
Not even going to try. There was a volcano. Deepwater Horizon happened. The Bishop of Augsburg, Walter Mixa, apologizes and asks for forgiveness for his physical abuse of children in the 70s and 80s. So we got some world politics happening. Mm-hmm. The United Kingdom is accused of complicity in torture of Afghanistan as peace campaigner Maya Evans seeks a judicial review of the government's role in the extraordinary rendition of suspects. Mm-hmm. So we have sort of the end of the Iraq war and like Afghanistan conflict. Or just like kind of flagpole in that conflict. A deputy mayor of a part of Afghanistan is shot dead while praying at a mosque, which is pretty brutal, and I'm kind of glad they didn't make an episode about that.
Yeah.
I think the Newsroom is at its best when they talk about U.S. politics, because whenever they get into like global world politics, it gets awkward, it gets messy.
Yeah.
Because that's a thing. This is around the time when that James Bond movie Skyfall was on hiatus because of MGM not being a company anymore for a while.
Oh.
I remember hearing about that. Remember Skyfall almost didn't come out because the company was like, we don't have any money. What are we doing? What's going on?
That's funny.
And John, is there anything else in here that you think that looks interesting?
Not particularly.
President of the United States, Barack Obama, speaks of the, quote, unbreakable bonds and special relationship between the U.S. and Israel on the 62nd anniversary of Israel's birth. That's interesting considering the way that the U.S.'s role in the Palestine-Israel conflict has changed a lot, even in the last 7-8 years.
Yeah.
And how I don't think a lot of other presidents would talk about like how good our relationship is with other countries. Or if they would be lying. But yeah, Deepwater Horizon, they kind of got the big one. That's a really big deal. They still talk about that one. I think they might still be cleaning it up. It's really bad.
Yeah.
They spilled a lot of oil into a lot of it. We killed a lot of life. But yeah, I think that is going to do it for We Just Decided To. John, did you have any other spare notes or stray thoughts?
No, not particularly. I think a nice thing that we can use our listener mail section for now is, since these are real events, if you have a memory of what was going on at the time that event took place, or if you find your own research of this is an event that was going on at the time that the show is set that you think would be interesting for us to talk about, then we can, of course, bring that up. We're still, navigating the sweet spot of television criticism along with talking about news and current events or past current events. So let us know what you want to hear about, what you think would be cool, if you have some input or some memories of your own, and we'll incorporate those into the show.
Fantastic. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the news bag.
Yes.
I'm going to turn it over to the bag of news, the news bag. And we'll be right back to discuss News Night 2.0. Breaking news, breaking news. It's time for the news bag. Welcome to the news bag. This is a segment hosted usually by me, Alan, your co-host, your lovely newsboy. And it's where I read the feedback, the comments, the emails, the tweets that we receive on the ChatzRoom. Today, we're going to be doing the very first news bag. And I'm going to be reading people's responses to the pilot and second episode of the Newsroom. Let's start with some tweets. We got a few from our old buddy and Static Dax on Twitter. Long-time listener, long-time fan, wonderful human being. Talking about how it's pretty annoying trying to buy this series because the DVDs are expensive. This is a problem, I will say, with HBO stuff in general, is that it's too expensive to just buy because they put it all on their streaming services, but Dax was saying he doesn't have internet where... he doesn't have, like, consistent internet where he watches TV. So, he says, I don't even have cable or internet. The only time I'm online is, like, now when I'm in a restaurant or Starbucks or work with my iPad. So, yeah, it's frustrating. I know most of the services, though, do offer, like, letting you download stuff, but you don't want to, like, download gigabytes of the Newsroom on Starbucks Wi-Fi. You will get kicked out. Our old longtime buddy, not old as an old person, but, like, from a long time ago, Angela Scrangela on Twitter is excited to be watching the show. She said it doesn't really seem like her type of thing, but she's going to give it a shot, and she's excited for politics, and she's looking forward to having us in her ear holes again, because Angela has stepped out for the entirety of our last season, the last chat spinner, which you should listen to if you haven't. We watched all of Avatar: The Last Airbender and talked about it, and Magellan hadn't seen it yet, so it was a good time. It was like 6 months of our lives. But moving right along, we also got some emails this week. So one specifically that I'm going to read parts of. It's a very long email from Dax as well. Dax basically sends us an email every week that he gets a chance to watch the episodes of the shows. And he sends really good emails. They're usually very funny. He lashes on to really specific things. And they're good. So I'm going to just kind of jump around here. He says, greetings, Allen and Magellan. Congrats on another year of TV watching / podcasting fun. So begins our journey into the Newsroom. I start this email minutes before watching the first episodes, knowing nothing except these 4 things. 1, it's an Aaron Sorkin show, which I know only because you guys mentioned it, and I have heard his name before from Sports Night, which he liked. 2, I saw Jeff Daniels listed as the lead, and his picture is all over my recent search for the show to buy it, so I know he's in it. And 3, in his search he noticed what he would consider to be an extreme low episode count. He's saying, I guess I'm old school or just old, and I remember shows growing up having at least 22 and maybe even 30 episodes per season, and I don't really watch a lot of new stuff, but I know Game of Thrones tends to do shorter seasons, and he says, I blame the writer's strike in 08 or 09, but that's a different conversation. Anyways, short seasons. And then finally, Allison Pill, who he says he doesn't remember what she's from, and he didn't want to look it up because he didn't want to spoil anything. Basically, regarding number 3, HBO tends to always keep their seasons short. I think it's sort of I think HBO does that in their modern shows in the last like 10, 15 years or whatever, to keep engagement high, to keep people talking about the show for 10 weeks. Because once you get beyond 10 weeks, people kind of get tired of talking about shows. You can see like Star Trek Discovery or Twin Peaks, like longer season shows. Although Star Trek kind of ended a little early, and Twin Peaks, at least in my corner of the internet, people were talking about it till the very end. But people were hyped about like the premiere of Twin Peaks: The Return, and then like the people who kept watching were the ones who were like strapped in. So it kind of like the air around the show changes the longer the season goes on, and HBO realized that and kept their seasons very, very short. But also the Newsroom seasons got shorter and shorter because of like writers' problems and them not getting as much funding, and also from what I understand, just like conflict and they like had to end the show early. Not that I'm not gonna say it feels rushed. I would say the whole show feels rushed, if anything, but I digress. His final point about Allison Pill. If I can think of anything you know her from, I mean, she's like a pretty famous actor in the last 5 or 6 years. She was in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which is what most people know her from. She's very good in that. She was also in some other things that I can't remember right now. So I'm going to vamp until this comes up on YouTube. Or on IMDb. It's Milk. It's Goon. Dan in Real Life. The other Goon movie. The Woman in Deep. Zoom. the Newsroom. Alison Bill's in a lot of stuff. She's in a lot of indie stuff. But I would have figured Dax, being a huge nerd, knows her from Scott Pilgrim. But anyways, he goes on to say, it's time to watch the show. First 2 episodes watched. I must say it's a lot like Sports Night, but with swear words thrown in for, I guess, HBO reasons. He expected it to be different than stuff like how, the first episode of Stargate SG-1 had boobs in it because it was on Showtime, and then forgot that it becomes a campy, awesome show later. He so recently saw Sports Night and figured he can kind of pinpoint the Aaron Sorkin style, which is, just to condense this, a lot of fast talking, a lot of people walking, a lot of people yelling and swearing at each other, and what he describes as 5-minute conversations that get old after 20 seconds. Some glaring examples from the start are Will yelling at the few people left in the office saying, "Where is everyone?" and everyone somehow knowing exactly what has happened and not telling him, so he just keeps talking. Basically arguing that that kind of thing doesn't progress character, it's just a waste of time. And then when Margaret is arguing with Dawn about her parents, he keeps telling her very straightforward that he's not ready, and they just kind of spin their wheels, and it's like, why are you like this? His other major annoyance was the shaky cam, which he doesn't like on this show. He doesn't like it when people shake the camera. When indie movies started doing this a lot, this was a big deal, and it was done for economic reasons, and it was cheaper to have a camera person hold it than have them put it on their shoulders or to get tracks or dollies like people used to do. Everyone thinks it makes scenes feel real or adds tension. He says it does not. It bugs him. If 2 people are having a tear-jerking, life-altering conversation, the only thing I as an audience member should be feeling is how much I care about them and not the camera shaking. With his rant over, he also said he enjoyed these episodes, so he doesn't feel ripped off having bought the show sight unseen. There was good acting, messy dialogue, some good jokes that made him laugh more than he was expecting. The cast has a lot of names he recognized. And as for character development, he saw some Maggie and Dawn relationships stuff going on from a mile away, just like in The Office with the Jim and Pam stuff. Or Natalie and Jeremy from Sports Night. The Will-Mac relationship I was over with as soon as they were on screen together. I agree there's no chemistry there, Dax. It's a good point. Jim and Neil seem to get along from the start, so there's a potential for a good friendship. Jim and Dawn could start going same interesting ways. Charlie will continue to be the old cranky wise guy until he dies a sad demise. I don't know, did they get to wrap it all up at the end, or did it get canceled? I don't think it got canceled. I think they got to wrap it up. The show ends. And then he says, at the end of the day, it's entertaining enough that I'm sure to be entertained in the upcoming weeks, seeing what happens. I end this email with 2 thoughts. I keep saying it because I keep seeing Sports Night similarities. It's the same show, basically, but I liked Sports Night. Fucking savage, Dax. 2, he says, I'm a Marine, Don. I will beat the shit out of you. I don't care how many protein bars you eat. Which is a really good Charlie line that we didn't explicitly call out in our discussion, but I love Charlie. Charlie's the best character on the Newsroom. That's a fact. It's not a hard fact because the Newsroom has a lot of bad characters on it. Excuse the raspy voice. I am coming off of a bit of a sickness, and I'm recording this very, very late. Or, late for me. This is actually being recorded the night before it goes up. Oops! So don't tell anyone. But I'm going to put some fun music over it and then just publish it so I can get some sleep tonight, and so that y'all can get the first episode of this fun new podcast straight to your ear holes. Thank you so much for listening to the first edition of the Newsbag. I'm going to turn it right back over to Magellan and Allen as they discuss Newsnight 2.0.
Welcome back to the ChatzRoom. The second episode we watched this week was Season 1, Episode 2, Newsnight 2.0, which was written by Aaron Sorkin, directed by Alex Greaves, aired on July 1st, 2012, and it takes place on April 23rd, 2010. In this episode, after a painfully long boardroom meeting sequence where Mac can't figure out acronyms, she breaks down what the team should be striving for with Newsnight 2.0. The soft relaunch of the show that she is spearheading. In her efforts to spice up the show, she approaches the host of ACN's afternoon economics show, Sloan Sabbath, and asks her to join Newsnight. Jim tries to mansplain interviewing to Maggie, but she reveals that she dated the press aide she was about to interview, and it ended badly. Everyone's afraid to tell Will this, and in an effort to defend his kind nature, Mac sends him an email asking him if he can reveal to everyone that she was the one who cheated on him when their relationship ended, not the other way around. Naturally, Mac doesn't know how to use email and sends this out to the entire staff of ACN. After all of this goes badly, the night's broadcast is a complete mess, with conservative gun-toters bickering over ignorant pageant winners as Will fails to listen to Mac or do his job. Afterwards, at a weirdly nice karaoke bar with cheap appetizers, Jim publicly reprimands Maggie for her mistake before having someone drive her home. Finally, Will apologizes to Mac over the phone and then wistfully stares at the Statue of Liberty because, damn it, Aaron Sorkin, America. Alan, what did you think of Newsnight 2.0?
This episode completely flew over my head. It's just more. It like felt like a part 2.
Yeah.
The thing that bummed me out is like this is unfortunately like the pace that the show is going to land on is here's some character drama, here's how we deal with it, and then here's the news. That is, I'd say, 90% of the newsroom. Unfortunately, I don't find the character of Reese introduced in this episode convincing Will to kind of step over Mackenzie to be interesting. And so that falls apart. And then all the stuff with Maggie and Jim and the source felt like what we were just talking about. The worst, like, relationship, awkwardness, quirky, young people, sex, comedy, nonsense.
Yeah.
I just don't care.
Right.
So all of those scenes I just like checked out mentally during. And even like the news story is like way less interesting than what we had last time. I do think that the newscast is cool though. Like, you know, it's not, you don't need every one of the newscasts to go well. I think it's fun and worthwhile to see Will fail. Because the specific way that he fucks up, which is to say like not listening to people and giving his guests all the time to talk with no interruptions, it makes for like, in our way, good television. It's bad news, but it's good newsroom television, if that makes sense. Because you're like watching him fumble and stuff. But I don't know. I have very little to say about this episode. It's just kind of like dumb. What about you?
I don't know. I think I was a little more bought into the conflict that Will was having about whether or not to listen to the ratings guy. Because that's it. You know, that's the conflict that was set up for him in the very first scene of the first episode. And if you're not bought into that, then you're not going to be bought into the show. This idea of he's known as the Jay Leno of news, and does he want to be that or not? That's the central question of his character. I actually, you know, I had an emotional reaction when he follows the advice of the ratings guy and puts on the Sarah Palin clip and tries to defend her. There was something about that actually felt character driven. It felt like it was making a commentary on news audiences. I don't know, it just felt like that's what the newsroom could be about. And the conversation, what does it mean to do the news the right way? We're actually starting to dive into that and to think about that. And Aaron Sorkin actually presents one aspect of doing the news right that's interesting, and he starts to break it down, which is you should present the best possible versions of every argument. Not the most sensational, not the most eye-catching, but
Or
the
clippable
best,
or whatever.
yeah, but the best composed and best presented versions of each argument, so that people can make an informed decision about which part of the argument they think is the most valid. That is something worth discussing and thinking about. And seeing these characters fail to do that is a nice beat, I think, because it shows that this show is okay with having its characters mess up and do things wrong. You may have been skeptical that could have happened after the first episode where they did everything right with no effort at all. So I appreciated the news stuff. And then the relationship stuff was, yeah, the capital W worst. The worst period show period. No, I'm just kidding.
No, you're not. I'm just kidding. I will say that watching him flub that whole segment gave me anxiety that felt like I was empathizing with everybody else watching it.
He wasn't flubbing it, though. He was purposefully continuing it to spite everybody else because he was upset with Mackenzie. I mean, I thought it was hilarious. He's setting them up, his guests. I guess we can just talk about that. So the news item on the table here is what was the law, the name of the law? SB 1070, is that right?
I believe so, yeah.
Is that thing in Arizona where essentially police officers could stop people and ask them for proof of citizenship or residency or something like that?
Yes, the Arizona SB 1070 law. Yep.
Yeah. And so it's this conversation about immigration, basically. And they have somebody lined up to give the position of being against the law, but they couldn't get anybody from the governor's office because of some convoluted nonsense. And so they have a panel of kind of kooky conservative characters. And I thought it was funny, the sequence where Will tries to set them up to have a sane, logical, if you think that there's logic to it, logical reason to support the law. And then they just continue to kind of give their zany, wacky opinion or to say nothing at all. Yeah, I thought that worked. So there was some faltering there, but he keeps doing it and he keeps digging into it because he wants to upset everybody else.
And yeah, I mean, it's fun to watch Mackenzie be like, please cut it. And he's like, no, go on. Come on. Say more about how your gun has a name.
Right.
With the cartoon gun-toting conservative who's like, they have that fun little back and forth of like, extremely relevant, by the way, we should build a wall. But what if yeah, wasn't that terrifying to hear?
Yeah.
Wasn't that like laughing and crying at the same time? He's like, we should build a wall. And he's like, well, what if you say we build a wall, they say build a ladder. And he's like, well, we'll build it 1 foot higher. But what if they build a ladder 1 foot higher? Well, shut up.
Yeah.
Like, just hitting no conclusion. And then talking to the pageant person who has nothing to say about politics and only wants to talk about like how people, pageant winners are brought onto the news to be like paraded around and made fun of and made into news clips, which is exactly what's happening to her.
Right.
It just feels... This scene was weird for me. It's like interesting, but I didn't get a lot out of it. I think part of the problem, if we're really going to get to what I mean, is this scene doesn't have a lot to say about the immigration bill. It's all about like the plot of the episode. It has nothing to say about the news. It's just like, hey, this is like Will is making this awkward for everybody. Anyways, like he made this choice. He made like a really crazy choice. Let's watch it happen. And you're supposed to derive entertainment from that, and which you're saying you do. And
well, this is really, again, it gets to this core question of what is the show about? Because if this is a show about doing the news right, part of the idea of the first episode is that Will is a character who never shares an opinion. And so the way to make the news better is that newscasters share their opinions. They talk about what they think makes sense, what they think is ridiculous. The core thing that is being explored and touted as a good value of news is that we need to bring on people from both sides and have them share the best versions of their arguments, let the people decide. So that's not exactly the same thing as the newscaster giving their opinion, right? And then also, Will McAvoy is set up to have kind of a xenophobic view of immigration.
Say more about that, huh?
Well, because he's anti-immigration.
Right.
And so he is presented as having an opinion that is not necessarily, that's not necessarily reasonable or trustworthy.
Right.
On the issue that's being discussed in this show where we're supposed to trust the newsman to give us our opinions. So it's just weird. You're right that it's not talking about the politics of immigration at all. It's talking about the way in which news is presented in a kind of very plastic way. And any way in which immigration is discussed at all is at the sort of level that I discussed immigration with my stepdad when I was in high school. You know what I mean? So it really isn't a show about politics. It's a show about the news, but it's not consistent about what it thinks good news looks like.
I think it's also about how like like the people who make the news for you are people who they can't always give you like the perfect version of it. We're supposed to expect that from them. We're supposed to hold them to a standard, but like sometimes there's just internal drama, and sometimes a source gets messed up because somebody was in a bad position in a college dorm room 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And now that like the A to B to C means that the final news report at the end of the evening is super awkward to watch. It's not always clean. It's not always good and works out well, but they made it. They made it. And that's like all the stuff with Maggie and Jim and her roommate and the press aide, like just completely uninterested me. Like I like did not click. I understood what was happening. The idea was she had a mock interview. The mock interview was going to be with a press aide. But it turns out that he like his ex came over while they were making out, and then she hid under the bed and stayed under there while they had sex for 5 minutes. Which also like jokes about like sex jokes.
Yeah, so that wasn't clear to me why that messed things up for them. Did she bring it up in the pre-interview, or did they not have a pre-interview? That was sort of, I don't know, that was weird. Because the setup here is Jim is talking down to Maggie and trying to make her feel stupid and talk around her. And it just continues this pattern of, I mean, this is what Maggie's arc is going to be, is men explaining how to do things to her until they say, you know what? I think you got it. And that's just going to happen over and over and over again for the whole show.
Yes.
So that, fuck.
Yes.
So that happens. And then Maggie isn't given a chance to be good at that even. You know what I just thought of? It's like it would be really interesting to compare Maggie in this show to Peggy in Mad Men.
Ooh. Now you're saying things I'm interested in.
Mad Men, I feel like, is a show that does this right. Where it
does it better in some parts. Yeah.
Where it has a young woman character who's in a male-dominated industry and has the ability to succeed, but has to navigate the bullshit machismo and chauvinism of men and the way that they conduct themselves in the workplace. And I don't know, I'll have to watch some Mad Men and make that comparison, but it's something to think about.
I think, well, just what I remember is that like Peggy evolves on that show.
Right.
And sort of like realizes very quickly that the way to be successful in this world is to not take shit from nobody. Like she just becomes her own person by sheer force of will. Whereas right now it feels like Maggie is being defined by what people tell her. And she's like, probably in Sorkin's mind, he isn't thinking of her as like a dumb girl. He's thinking of her as like the junior, like new one who's learning to get good and gonna get good someday.
Right.
But that obviously comes with a lot of like gender inequality problems that he doesn't seem to be considering. Or seems to be considering and handling badly, if you want to be honest.
Yeah. Well, and it also, in Mad Men, Peggy has the sort of, at least at certain points, she can look at Joan and have aspirational feelings. Joan is a woman who's confident in this workplace and is able to accomplish what she wants to accomplish because she is driven and powerful. Whereas Maggie's looking at Mackenzie, and Mackenzie is being written with the same kooky, weird traits or habits as Maggie.
Right, there is no like strong woman for her to look up to.
And Mackenzie has moments where she is extremely competent and forceful, and a cool character, but she just feels like an older Maggie. She doesn't feel like a more experienced Maggie, I guess.
She doesn't know how to forward emails.
It's silly. Anyway, so Maggie's ability to be good at the news is undone by this totally fabricated, made-up personal issue that it's just like, it's just cartoonish. And that's what causes the big problem. And for some reason, Maggie takes responsibility for that. This sequence was very unclear to me. What exactly did she do that was wrong? I guess she didn't say that she knew that this guy was going to be upset with her or something.
until it was too late and they couldn't fix it. Like, yeah.
So
It's sorry, the last thing I was gonna say about the comparisons between Maggie and her, like the first scene, not the first scene, but the big like boardroom scene that occupies way more of the episode than you think it does. Like I timed it out at about 15 minutes.
Really, the Newsnight 2.0 scene?
Yeah, or no, 13 and a half
at
minutes.
The beginning?
Yes.
Wow.
It's so long.
Wow.
Because they have to include all these jokes about like she has, the board, the markers on the easel, and she's putting out the acronyms, but it doesn't make any sense, and that's its whole little mine of humor. And then we have to get introduced to Kendra and Gary and their characters, only in so much as they are the only two people of color in this room.
Right, and they don't have their characters are described to them.
Yep.
By the Aaron Sorkin stand-in white guy.
Yep. Gary, you're the one black guy who doesn't like Barack Obama. Yep, that's me. Kendra, you're smart and you graduated from college with a good degree. Yep, that's me.
We should keep talking about race in the show because the way that Neil is handled in this scene just boiled my blood. Because in the first episode, there's this sort of offhand joke of somebody thinking that he's like the IT guy or something like that. And then, of course, no, he's not the IT guy. He just runs the blog. So it has to be something kind of techie, and he has to be the one who knows all the numbers because, racist assumptions. And then when Mackenzie reads off the memo from corporate or whatever saying that our email handles are different and there's autocorrect on our email accounts, everyone looks to him like, hey, can you explain this to us? Because we don't really understand it. And then he has this reaction of like, oh, okay, well, I should have expected this. I should have expected
what my life is now.
All of the people in the room to turn to me. How do these people not know what autocorrect is?
It's 2010.
It's 2010. Are you kidding me? Are you joking, Aaron Sorkin, that a major plot point hinges on the fact that a character does not understand autocorrect or sending an email to everybody?
And the fact that you can somehow like send an email to not only all of ACN but like the whole like multimedia court. They were like, yeah, there are people who like don't even work here anymore that got this, like from different countries. And you're like, why does it work like that? Why can anybody send that?
Why are they all on an email list together that anyone can email to?
You're gonna kill me, but this is exactly what I'm saying.
Moderator approving these things.
Why did you write this? Why is this the like? Oh my god! Oh my god! Mackenzie, you're the smart one. Please learn how to use email.
I was so mad at what this episode did to Mackenzie as a character.
Yep, straight to the toilet.
That nonsense. And then here's a scene you should have timed out, man. The scene where she brings in Sloane Sabbath,
played by Olivia Munn.
And Sloane Sabbath is this economics expert. She's got a PhD. She's got the show. And Mackenzie says, you should be on Newsnight. You should do a little 5-minute segment every night where you do the economics. Cool. That's something. Maybe we'll see more of Sloane Sabbath later and we'll get something out of her character. For now, she's just sort of economics person. And then Mackenzie says, yeah, and I'm doing it because, you're good looking. You got nice legs, and that's what the people want. So that's what my character's all about, is giving the people what they want. So that's what you're going to be doing. And you can be bothered by that moment. I was certainly bothered. I was willing to move past it if the rest of the scene went better. And then it didn't at all. Because then it got into Sloane saying that Will is a jerk and he cheated on you. And my God, it felt like an hour of just Mackenzie like closing the door on Sloane and saying, wait, come back. People don't like him? Why don't people like Will? Will's great. What, people think he's a jerk? What? People think he cheated on me? That's crazy. What are you talking about? People really think that? No, hold on. People really think that about Will?
Mackenzie's character is often just a stammering British stereotype, and it's super bad.
I was melting.
It's not only the problem being that the email thing is dumb, it's the fact that the email she sent out is basically convincing. It's hey Will, could you tell people the truth, and can I like let you defend your own character so people like you more, the man? Like, all she wants in this episode is for people to like the dude, and it's like people already like like whatever, him being like the roguish asshole who's actually terrible. It really isn't that bad for him. Like I don't think it's like gonna break down his self-confidence, and he's gonna feel terrible that his crew doesn't love him as a person.
Right.
It's fine that he's seen as an asshole. But she's like, no, they need to know the real you, that you have a heart and that I cheated on you. So come on, go tell them. And then, of course, that, like, first of all, you don't send an email like that. I've never sent an email like that.
Right.
First of all, whatever, text it. Or say it in person. Like, I know you're busy, and I know it's, like, a complicated work environment, but, like, it doesn't make sense that it's an email. And then it gets sent to everyone, and they all go, like, oh, well, this is awkward. But it doesn't even, like, it's not, like, what's the effect of that? Now everyone knows that she cheated on him.
Yeah, it doesn't
So
really...
fucking what?
Yeah, he's just mad. That's the effect, I guess.
Yes. Their relationship is strained. Great work.
I'm on board with the idea that she is this idealistic person who messed up in their relationship before, maybe is still in love with him, wants people to think the world of him because she loves him. I'm okay with that. I think that that's a fine set of characteristics for a character to have. The thing that I'm not fine with is that half of her dialogue is devoted to her telling either other people or telling Will how amazing Will is.
Yes. Yes. You nailed it.
It's like
here's my last thing. Here's my like big thing. In this episode, the two major plots are that Mackenzie convinces people that Willer is good, everyone finds out that she cheated on him, and also the news goes badly because he doesn't listen to her and does his own fucking thing. Nothing changes. Nothing is demonstrably different, except now we know like there's a strained relationship between Mackenzie and Will, and race is introduced, and Sloane Sabbath is now on the team. She's not even a character yet.
And Will is reaffirming his dedication to the mission of what they're doing.
By the end of the episode, yeah.
Which is something. Because it was easy for him to be dedicated to it in the first episode where they did a good job. But him being dedicated to it even when they do a bad job shows that he's acknowledging... I mean, he's part of the reason that things get messed up. He's the one who brings in the Sarah Palin thing and makes Mackenzie mad about that. And he apologizes for that. Or he takes accountability, takes responsibility for that piece. So that at least was meaningful to me. But you're right that otherwise, this episode is kind of just getting us back to the point where the episode started of, okay, yeah, so we're going to do the news right. Cool. That's what we said in the first episode.
We already did that.
Now let's
do the news right.
Yeah, here we are.
Yes. So you're getting at why this is actually a thing you texted me a couple days ago that I really liked, which is that you said a thing that's important for us to talk about is to think about how Sorkin and how he frames himself as a progressive reformer, but a lot of his work is meant to idealize the existing organs of the status quo. Like this guy, he knows that like things need to change and we need to improve things, but he doesn't ever say how. Like what does doing the news better mean? It means having integrity. It's the bullet points that Mackenzie says, which are when you are writing the news, you have to think about what is going to inform the people at the polling booth. Like that is what good news is. She said a real thing that's in this show's opinion accurate. Is we need to inform the voting public.
Right.
We also need to, like you said earlier, give all sides the best possible argument so that nothing feels biased. And also, we need to have an opinion at the same time. These are all things that have to happen.
Yeah.
But like, none of these things really happen in this episode. They started to happen in the last one, but like, it's just like we've set the goals. Now do them. Do the news good.
Right. I want to see us try to do these things right and see what goes into that. What are the ways that works? What are the pitfalls? And they sort of do that in this episode, showing that, you know, if you bring on these kind of hackish, weird guests, then it diminishes your credibility. But there doesn't seem to be any fallout. I thought that maybe the guy the ratings guy, because he makes the point of like only conservative people watch TV news. I thought he'd make the point that people were really bothered by the guests, but there doesn't really seem to be any fallout from that. So it's kind of unclear. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't want to watch a show where one of the last climactic emotional moments is Maggie being the cartoon drunk girl in the bar talking about her $45,000 loans, which wow, dude. And then her breaking up with Don in the most awkward sequence of all time, where he's like, "Oh, you're being unreasonable," and she's like, "You're a piece of shit. You never respected me." And he's like, "You're being he's Aaron Sorkining down to a drunk girl and being like, "You're being crazy right now." And she's like, "No, fuck, this is stupid. Get out of I'm breaking up with you." And he's like, "All right, great." And then he says, "No, I'm the breaking up with you." And then she gets sad. And then she's wrecked by it. It makes her cry. You're like, "Are you kidding me? Maggie, you don't need him. Honey." I want to be there for Maggie so badly because I don't know if it's I see something in myself in her, but she just makes these bad decisions constantly. And then people reprimand her for it. And it makes me feel bad.
Right.
I think that's what it is. Because then Jim is like, "All right, everything's going to be okay. But I need to yell at you in front of everyone to know that so I can assert dominance at this karaoke bar."
Yeah.
So that you can learn. But ultimately, I understand you're a human. You make mistakes. Good job. Keep up the good work, Maggie. Both sides of that scene suck.
Right.
Don being like, "Woof, I'm out of that. I'm dodged that bullet." And then Jim being like, "Hey, kid, someday you're going to get good at the news too," are both really bad ways to portray Maggie.
Right. Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If every episode of the ChatzRoom ends with us deeply sighing, then I have achieved my goal. But yeah, I think that's pretty much the episode. It's a lot, and at the same time, it is nothing. John, do you have any more thoughts? I want to just this was good. I like that we're not just collaboratively poo-pooing on the show together. We're finding things to like and dislike differently.
I mean, here's what it comes to is that when you watch an Aaron Sorkin program, you want so desperately for it to be good.
Yeah, I don't want any show to be bad, but especially this type of show.
Well, because there are just so many moments in his dialogue that feel amazing.
Yeah.
That are really sharply written and that you enjoy watching. It makes you, for whatever, whether it's good or bad, it makes you feel smart for watching it. Yeah. It makes you feel clever. That's a nice thing to have in a TV show. And not a lot of TV shows are written with the rhythm that this is written with. And it has at least this veneer of idealism that makes you want to like it. But then there are just things about it that don't work. So I'm really, really excited to watch more of this show.
It's interesting. It's a conversation starter. And that's what it was at the time. I think that's the other good thing. It's we're doing this show justice in that we're giving it a fair shake and being disappointed by it. That's what it was.
Yeah. I think it's different for us. If this is your first show with us, that's great. Welcome.
Hi, hello.
If you've been here since the beginning, welcome. We continue to welcome you and love you. This is very different for us, I think, than the previous 3 shows that we've covered, because this is a show that I think across the board we can say is not that great. Whereas the previous 3 shows, I think we would heartily recommend to anybody.
I can't recommend the show to everybody.
Yeah. And so I don't know. If you as a listener are intrigued by that the way that I'm intrigued by that, then let's watch it. Come on, let's do it. But yeah, I think there's going to be some weeks where we sigh heavily, like you said, and that's just how that's going to go.
Indeed, my friend. Before we talk about what we're going to sigh about next week, let's see what happened on April 23rd, 2010 in the news. In the news, that's the name of this segment. It's called In the News. 80 people die after drinking illegal homemade banana gin laced with methanol in Kampala, Uganda.
Jeez.
Farts.
This segment is just going to it's just going to drive home the fact that a lot of bad things happen.
I want to try and find the ones that aren't all like miserable, but 2010 was not an amazing year for the world. Here's one. A total of 2.89 million new jobs were created in China's urban areas during the first 3 months of this year.
Okay.
Yeah, right. All right. Okay. A volcano exploded in Iceland. They're still dealing with that.
Yep,
Remember that?
On. That oil spill still leaking oil.
Still a problem that did not stop happening. 7 people, including 6 police officers and a civilian, are killed, and 2 other officers are injured in a shootout with gang hitmen in Juarez City. That's actually, unfortunately, every single day in the city of Juarez.
Yeah.
Lots of problems in the politics of China, which was going through a lot of upheaval at the time. Protests in Bangkok. Greece is on fire actively. On April 23rd, specifically, Greece activates their 45 billion euro aid package offered by Europe. Yeah, so that's when that started. That did not go well. And then, hey, a Spanish hospital claims to have performed the world's first full-face transplant. Yeah!
Cool.
That's the news.
That's how you report the news, right?
You hit them with a bunch of sad stories, and then you say a weird one, and that's it. That's the news.
Yeah.
Magellan, please do the people justice. Tell them what we're watching next time on the ChatzRoom.
Pull that up because I forgot that I'm doing this now.
I'm so excited. Can't believe we're already on the best episode of the show.
Really? Like the actual best one?
No.
Okay. Next week, we are watching Season 1, Episodes 3 and 4. Episode 3 is entitled The 112th Congress. In an on-air editorial, Will apologizes for past newscasts and promises a new era of integrity for Newsnight. Will's new approach rankles CEO Leona Lansing. Jim soothes Maggie during a panic attack. Don charges Elliot to get in the game.
Jesus. Jim soothes Maggie during a panic attack is a bad sentence.
If you had to write an episode synopsis of the show, I'm sure that would be one of the 4 sentences you would use.
Exactly. Leona Lansing's amazing. I'll say nothing other than Leona Lansing is amazing.
Okay.
And Elliot's back. Ugh, Elliot. I hate Elliot. He's just, there's no reason, dude. He's just boring. If you're like, oh, Alan's teasing something. No, Elliot's just really boring.
Okay.
I don't like that actor very much. But yeah, Leona Lansing. Woo. Rock on.
Episode 4 is entitled I'll Try to Fix You. Will's mission to civilize takes a hit when he finds himself in the tabloid spotlight. Wade approaches Will with a story. Dawn gets Maggie to fix Jim up with her roommate. Okay. Will refuses to follow the media rumor mill and make a call on a breaking story. Okay.
Magellan.
Yeah.
When we watched clips of different shows to see which ones we should watch, I showed you a clip from I'll Try to Fix You. It's maybe the funniest clip of all time. It's the moment. It's like the Fix You moment. Remember why it's called Fix You?
Yep.
Yeah, that's all happening next week, folks. Get excited for it. Strap in for a really fun pair of episodes about the news. And then strap in for our discussion of them. But first, it's time for some plugs. Magellan.
Yes. You can find me on Twitter at JustAFluke. That's JUSTAPFLUKE. You can also listen to my other podcast called Adulthood. It's coming back. Part of my New Year's resolutions, folks, is that I'm going to make this show go. It is a program in which I watch 15 seconds of the movie Boyhood every week and then make a podcast about my life and about those 15 seconds. Alan, what about you?
You can find me over on Twitter at Allen Ibrahim. That's spelled ALLENIBRAHIM. And you can find me every month on Fireside Friends, which can be found at firesidefriends.net. It's a podcast I host with some other friends about media, and we're going to be playing the video game Doki Doki Literature Club for our January discussion.
Cool.
It's exciting stuff.
Good stuff.
Yeah. It's a horror visual novel about anime girls. If you like anime girls or the news or the ChatzRoom, find us on the internet. You can follow us at ChatsPod on Twitter. If you want to interact with the show, you can follow us there. And if an episode is delayed. That's where you'll find out why. There's usually like fun little Easter eggs, like I overslept, for example. You can also email us at chatspod@gmail.com if you want to give us some feedback there. We love it. We always appreciate your emails. They're so good, and we'll read them on the middle segment and talk about them if you want to talk about the news or us or whatever. And be sure to rate us on whatever podcast app you use. iTunes, 5 stars. That's a really big way for people to find the show. And if you have followed us before or if you're new, you should tell your friends about it and tell them to check it out.
Yeah.
Give it a subscribe or something. I don't know how podcast metrics work anymore. It's 2018. Oh, that hurt me to say that.
Why?
I wanted to say it's 2017 and then I realized it's not. Like I had to correct myself. Woof.
Wow.
We're in the next year. It's a new world, folks. Thank you so much for listening to the Chats Room. Good night.